Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Okay, so we're talking about a roller coaster, all right? But not the fun kind. Like, you know those rickety wooden ones with the suspicious bolts? That's Hitler's economic policies. We're going deep on how the Nazis took Germany from a complete economic wreck and somehow made it, a war machine.
It's incredible when you think about it, right? Like completely overhauling a national economy. They went all in on debt, these crazy schemes. And then, of course, the war just devouring resources.
And all those stories about secret promissory notes and fake companies, it's practically an economic thriller. Then you throw in the guns versus butter dilemma, and yeah, this is not your Econ 101 lecture.
It's so important to understand this period, though. See, behind the propaganda, the really extreme policies, there are these echoes of basic economic truths. We see the temptation of a quick fix, the pull of ideology, and the cost of unchecked ambition. These are things that can happen anywhere, anytime.
It all starts in the early 1930s. Germany is in ruins. I mean, the economy is shattered. Unemployment is just like off the charts. People are desperate. That's the backdrop for Hitler's rise to power, right?
And that's key, that context. Germany was primed for someone to come in with all the answers, right? Someone who could promise a way out. And, well, Hitler, at least for a while, seemed like he was delivering the goods, those early economic wins. It was almost like a magic trick, especially for a country so desperate for some kind of stability, like they wanted that return to their former glory.
Speaking of magic tricks, let's talk about the Reinhardt Program. That was a huge deal, right? Massive public works projects, highways, housing, they went all in. It's like Germany just woke up one morning and decided to build, build, build.
Oh, it was a power move, for sure. The Reinhardt Program, which they launched in '33, put people back to work immediately, like instant results. And that did something else, too. It boosted morale. You could feel the progress. Hello, look at the Autobahn, right? That's a perfect example. But here's the thing. The whole thing was built on this foundation of massive debt.
So they were spending money they didn't have, hoping for the best.
Basically. By 1935, you're talking about government spending hitting something like 50% of their GDP. It's classic short-term gain, long-term pain. A lot of those jobs, they were temporary. And the real core issues plaguing the German economy, they never really went away.
We just slapped a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
An expensive Band-Aid, that's for sure. But it bought Hitler something critical, time. He was able to consolidate his power because, to everyone else, he looked like the guy who saved the German economy from total collapse.
All while setting the stage for something far, far worse.
Exactly. And this leads us to 1934, and this guy, Hjalmar Schacht, with his brainchild, the new plan. Now, Schacht is a fascinating character, a brilliant but controversial economist. Some might even call him a bit of a financial wizard.
All right, so what kind of wizardry are we talking about here? What was this new plan?
Okay, so picture this. Germany is desperate, right? They need raw materials to fuel Hitler's whole rearmament obsession, but they've got no foreign currency. Schacht comes up with this system of bartering. They're trading goods, German industrial goods, for raw materials, dealing mainly with Eastern Europe and South America. Schacht was a big believer in a controlled economy, but he also knew that they needed trade, at least to some degree.
So a clever workaround to their economic problems, at least for a little while. But did it really fix anything in the long run?
It gave them some breathing room, yeah, but it couldn't change the fundamental problem, which was that Hitler wanted total self-sufficiency, autarky. Think of it like this. You want to build, say, a smartphone. Everything from mining those raw materials to putting the final product together happens within your borders. You rely on no one else. That was the goal.
And this is where things get even more, shall we say, interesting, the Mefo Bills.
Oh, yeah. This is where we enter the realm of, like, shadow economics. It gets pretty wild and sneaky. Basically, the Nazis created this fake company. It was called Mefo GmbH.
Wait, hold on. They just invented a company out of thin air. That sounds insane.
Oh, it's totally true. But it shows how desperate times lead to these, shall we say, creative financial moves that are never built to last. This phantom company, Mefo, issued these things called Mefo Bills. Essentially, think of them like IOUs. And they used these bills to pay for rearmament contracts. So on the books, it didn't look like they were spending a ton on weapons.
So it was like printing their own money, but like on the down low.
Exactly. At least it seemed that way for a while. It was clever, you gotta admit, but also pretty shady. And it masked this growing problem. Remember that huge debt from the Reinhardt Program? Well, it's about to get a whole lot bigger.
It's like trying to stuff I don't know, a giant inflatable whale into a kiddie pool. It's not going to end well.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. By 1936, Hitler was getting impatient. He was ready to put his master plan, world domination, into action. But to do that, he needed Germany to be completely self-sufficient, that whole autarky thing. So that's where we get the four-year plan, with, get this, Hermann Goering in charge.
Okay, wait. So we go from this financial wizard Schacht to Goering. What was Hitler thinking?
It does seem like a weird choice, right? But Hitler really trusted Goering. And to be honest, the four-year plan wasn't really about sound economics. It was about one thing. Rearmament, and doing it fast. It meant cutting off any reliance on foreign suppliers, no matter the cost. Germany had to become this fortress, making everything from steel to rubber all on their own.
Which brings us back to that guns versus butter idea, right? That classic dilemma. You have to choose weapons or, well, the things people actually need to survive.
Yeah, it's a tough choice, and it's something lots of countries have faced throughout history. For Germany, guns won, obviously, which meant that butter, those everyday necessities, they became really hard to come by. Imagine walking into the store, but the shelves are practically bare. That was daily life for a lot of Germans.
So how did people deal with that? I mean, it couldn't have been easy to just tighten their belts while the Nazis were spending all their resources on weapons.
There were definitely complaints, grumbling, for sure. But you can't underestimate the power of propaganda. The Nazis controlled the message. They shut down anyone who disagreed with them. And for a lot of Germans, that idea of a strong, independent Germany, it was powerful. They had been through so much losing World War I, then the economic chaos that followed. They wanted that humiliation erased. So the promise of greatness, it was a powerful drug, even if it meant making sacrifices along the way.
This all leads, of course, to the start of World War II in 1939. So here you have an economy that's already been through the ringer, right? How did they handle a full-blown war?
Well, the irony is, the war initially gave them a little boost, an economic one at least, but it was built on some pretty dark stuff. Germany starts conquering other countries, and suddenly they've got access to all those resources and industries. They're stealing raw materials, exploiting people for labor, basically using stolen goods to fuel their war machine.
So a quick sugar rush, not exactly a long-term strategy for success.
Not even a little bit. Relying on conquest. It's like, I don't know, building your house on a foundation of popsicle sticks, it's going to collapse eventually. And as the war dragged on, those cracks started to show.
And of course, the Allied bombing raids, I mean, those must have been devastating for the German economy.
Oh, they were crippling, no question. Factories were being turned to rubble. Infrastructure was wiped out. German industrial output, it just plummeted. And that whole system of relying on forced labor, that backfired too.
It's kind of a sad story when you think about it, right? Like, they created this system, the Nazis, to be powerful, to make Germany self-sufficient. And it just backfired in the worst way.
Yeah, it really shows that you can't just force an economy to do what you want, especially when it's built on things like fear and resentment. You can't expect people to be productive when they're being worked to death, living in fear of bombs. It was all going to fall apart eventually. Those policies, the debt, the focus on weapons, the whole idea that they could just take what they wanted, those things might have propped them up for a bit, but ultimately they led to Germany's downfall. It's like that old saying, you take shortcuts, you pay the price eventually.
It makes you wonder, was any of it real? Like, was that early economic recovery under Hitler? Was that, I don't know, a stroke of genius? Or was it just a bunch of desperate moves that happened to work out for a little while?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Historians are still arguing about that today. Some people look at those early economic advisors, like Schacht, and they see, well, savvy figures, even if they were compromised, morally. They knew how to work the system. So that argument is that those early wins, they were calculated. Ruthless, sure, but calculated.
But there's another side to that, right?
Oh, absolutely. The other side sees Hitler as this reckless gambler, driven by his ideology, not any sound economic plan. He was willing to bet everything on his vision, even if it meant ruining Germany. And, well, the fact that it all fell apart, kind of supports that view, doesn't it?
So what's the takeaway here? If we're looking back at this crazy period, what should we learn from it?
For me, it really comes down to sustainability, building an economy on things like debt, militarization, conquest, like the Nazis did. That's just not a recipe for lasting success. It's all built on a shaky foundation.
And let's not forget the whole absolute power corrupts absolutely thing. It's a reminder that ideology can be really seductive, especially when someone comes along offering simple solutions to complex problems. We have to be smarter than that.
Right. Because it's easy to get swept up in those promises, that idea of a leader who can restore a nation to greatness. But we got to look past that, Look beyond the promises, the fancy speeches, and really pay attention to what's happening with the economy.
We have to ask ourselves, what's the real cost of this so-called success? Who's really benefiting and who's going to end up holding the bag?
Exactly. Economic policy, when you get right down to it, is about making choices, right? And those choices have consequences. They can ripple outward, impacting individuals, entire nations, even the whole world.
And as we try to navigate our own complex world with all its economic ups and downs, the story of Hitler's economic roller coaster is, well, it's a powerful reminder. It reminds us to be skeptical of those promising quick fixes, to question those easy answers. Real prosperity, the kind that lasts, that's built on things like sustainability, fairness, this idea of respecting human dignity, that's a big one too.
And maybe just as important, remembering that history might not repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes,
Yeah.
You got to listen to those rhymes, learn from the mistakes of the past.
It's a bit of a sobering thought to end on, but an important one. So yeah, the next time you hear some leader going on about, I don't know, rapid economic growth or whatever, remember what happened in Germany. Ask the tough questions, challenge those assumptions, and never, ever take prosperity for granted.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.